And you've just heard Albatross, the latest single from David Latto, and I'm delighted to be joined by David now. Hello, David.
Hello, thanks for having me.
Oh, it's a pleasure. It's a pleasure. So what can you tell us about Albatross?
Albatross is a song based on a poem by the poet Charles Baudelaire, the French poet, and it was written in 1841, I believe. Anyway, I found this book of poems in the departure lounge when I was on my way to France. And it's actually it's not something I usually do, buy a book of poems. I tend to enjoy poetry more as it crosses my path rather than kind of seek it out. But I must have been feeling adventurous or sophisticated or like an intellectual or something, because I was going to France and I thought, well,
Get some Baudelaire in your back pocket.
Absolutely. Yeah, why not? So I picked this book of poems, and I flicked through to Albatross, and Albatross just rang me like a bell. It was one of those ones that kind of really speaks to you. And I read a few of them, and some of them are quite dark poems, in his Flowers of Evil book. But yeah, Albatross really struck me, and it kind of stuck with me for a long time. It's actually something I find quite difficult it's quite a difficult song to introduce, as I found the other night when I was playing, because there's so many layers to that poem and there's so much depth to it that finding a strand that will kind of engage the audience and they will relate to that's tricky. But I think I relate to it perhaps a little pretentiously from the same perspective as Baudelaire. He sees himself as the poet who has to interface with the crowd.
Well, a serious question. Do you find, when I ask questions like, can you tell us about your single and stuff, is it something that you think, well, just listen to it and you make up your own mind? Are you kind of reluctant, as some musicians are, to kind of expand further?
No, I mean, I certainly used to think like, oh, just let the music do the talking kind of thing, But I think there's a lot of value in providing a bit of context for people, especially if you have written the song with something in mind, just to kind of like to explore the depth and meaning behind something. The song can't do all of the talking, and I think it's your job. Well, I think it's my job, as I'm not speaking for everyone. My job as an artist to kind of to world build a little bit around the song and try and bring the song to life as part of a bigger kind of tapestry of meaning, so just to give people a little bit more than here's a song, go and listen to it and figure it out for yourself. I think certainly kind of in terms of like folk music, I think that certainly works. It kind of works to have a bit of a story behind the song.
Yeah, I suppose the folk traditions got a kind of tradition of storytelling kind of built into it. And I was thinking about your previous releases, and I was actually looking at some of your previous covers, and there's a lot of images of nature there that you've used, and so that's clearly an important influence in your music.
Yeah, I think like it's maybe something I don't consciously choose, but certainly natural spaces, places, and geography are kind of important to me. I'm kind of into this idea of psychogeography, like what experiences do you have when you're in a certain place, and how does that place allow you to express yourself? So if you're in Paris, for instance, you'll have a different set of thoughts come into your head than you will if you're in East Weems, So I'm really interested in that idea, and I think that perhaps just shows through in the choices that I make around kind of the music as well, and the artwork and things like that.
It's really interesting. I spoke previously to Jenny Sturgeon about her album The Living Mountain, and how she used Nan Shepherd's book to kind of do the same thing, to think about the sounds and the kind of, the geography of the area, the psychogeography, as you say, but also the kind of natural sounds that are there.
Yeah, absolutely. It's really interesting. And there's a French artist, I think, called, is he French or perhaps Madagascan artist called Chassol, and he made a whole album of jazz music inspired by birdsong. So he would record the birdsong, then he would build his jazz compositions around the bird songs that he heard on that day. And I think it's a really kind of novel and interesting idea that you can make music and become like this conduit for music that exists kind of everywhere. You just have to be open to receive it, kind of thing.
Yeah, that kind of almost tuning into the
world, exactly,
around you. I think it's interesting you talk about space and place, because that's something else I think about your music. I often, if this is such a thing, kind of Scottish Americana, isn't that, you share with a lot of the great American writers that idea of expanse and space, the sky is high and the mountains, and you know that thing. It's not an urban feel. It is definitely something that's got scope.
Yeah, there's kind of a cinematic quality to those landscapes, and perhaps something that's not tapped into as much here. You know, I actually have quite a few songs where I reference, like, I live in Kirkcaldy, I reference Kirkcaldy a lot, but you don't hear a lot of people references unpopular places. You know, so it's like I think it's just important to, it's another way of being honest in your artwork. I think is to try and to kind of take the places that you're familiar with and kind of bring them to life in a new way, or give them some new life, you know, especially if the place is not as vibrant as perhaps other places or more attractive places are.
And do you think that's changing at all? Because obviously Scottish music in general tended to be Central Belt focused, but there does seem to be, maybe because there's just more people, or just maybe because there's, you know, different scenes or whatever, but there does seem to be music coming from elsewhere now, or at least being heard. It was always there, you know, but now it's kind of getting heard.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's about time, really. I mean, I probably think of myself as being from the Central Belt because we're not far from Edinburgh here, you know.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, Fife has kind of quite a long tradition of producing artists, bands, and musicians. You know, from like Jimmy Shan to Nazareth to the Skids. You know.
Yeah. That's cool.
Yeah. So there's a lot going on here that perhaps doesn't get as much attention as bands. I was probably specifically Glasgow, because I think even bands from Edinburgh struggle to break through a little bit, you know. But that's probably changing a little bit just with the way people consume music now as well. You know, you're not relying on a gatekeeper for better or worse to tell you what's good. You know, you can like your friend's band, or like bands like Pete and Diesel and things like that from up in the Isle of Lewis. You know, really are able to create a lot of buzz around themselves without probably ever really having to play in Glasgow or Edinburgh. Not that that's a bad thing in any way.
No, it's interesting, I think, as well. Yeah, it's that idea, not perhaps of the geography of where the bands are, but almost, or the musicians are, but almost what they're writing about and the subject matter. Because, you know, bands like, say, the Skids or Nazareth, it tended to be not mainstream, but they were following either punk or rock or whatever. But here's bands almost taking in their own tradition and doing something with traditional music. I'm really interested how folk and traditional music are really adapting and collaborating with other styles.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's maybe part of that. I think for a long time we've maybe had a bit of a cultural cringe as well, where we don't like to, we've thought of Scottish music or Scottish folk music as being slightly twee or shortbread tin-esque, you know, and now I think a lot of artists are kind of going beyond that, those kind of simple ideas of what Scottish culture can be. We're maybe perhaps coming into our own a little bit more and saying that, you know, what we're seeing here is important in some way, and we want to express it as a legitimate expression of art as opposed to some sort of kitsch expression.
Yeah, it's forward looking or rather than kind of looking back, I think.
And international as well. You want to kind of like, what I love about other artists' music is their interpretation of their space and their relationships with it, you know, wherever they're from in the world. And it's good to be able to take that somewhere else and let someone else see, you know, your kind of interpretation of what's going on. It would be disingenuous, and I know because I've done it, but it is disingenuous sometimes to try and appropriate an idea of somewhere else without kind of having some sort of integrated experience of it, you know, just to write songs about Nashville or something without having ever been or know anyone who lives or works there. Seems a bit disingenuous to me, but that's everyone's got to make their own choices around those.
No, absolutely. And you take your influence, not particularly yourself, but a lot of musicians do take their influences globally. So it makes sense that they start to feed in more, perhaps, than they did previously. Can you talk a little bit about your music life during lockdown? Because I'm interested, you know, if that was a positive thing, or, you know, did you just miss the playing live or all that kind of thing? How was it for yourself?
Yeah, it was kind of, I'm not sure how it was. I think it's going to take a little time to kind of to put enough distance between it. It felt like I was just waiting for it to end the whole time, you know, and then trying to figure out what I could do in the meantime to keep myself ticking over creatively. So I released a few singles that I home recorded or recorded. I've got a little space in Edinburgh I share, so I released those. Albatross is one of them. And so I thought, well, the only thing I can really do here is kind of keep trying to put things out when I can. But yeah, the prospect of not getting, I think initially when lockdown came in, I was like, oh good, I'll get a little break. You know, I like somebody else is imposing a break on me, so this will be nice, and it'll last for 3 weeks. And then 18 months later, I've still not played a gig. So it's it wore thin after a while, but it allowed me to kind of reassess my priorities, and it allowed me to reassess what I was doing and how I wanted to kind of like show up in the world. I think perhaps I would taken doing music for granted a little bit before that, so it's definitely kind of kicked me up the bum in that way.
And you're someone I know who loves playing live, and you're now starting to think about playing live again. And how are you feeling about that? I mean, I was saying to you before we started recording, I'd been to my first gig, and there was a real kind of anxiety before I went, and then the old kind of feelings and memories kicked in, and I think, no, I'm really having a great time. But how are you feeling about it, going out again?
Well, we played our first gig at Peterhead Music Fun Day on Sunday, which was actually really, really good. And I was a little bit concerned before we went, just like, you know, how's this going to be being in a room with so many people? But like I said to you earlier, like when you're on stage, like it's such an energizing experience, and especially when it's going well. And we've been rehearsing for the last week while, so we've kind of been preparing to get back to things for a good few months now. So it's not like we're throwing ourselves into this without any preparation. So we played just 6 songs, and it was just wonderful. It was absolutely great. I loved it. So that kind of like it blew some of the fear away, I think.
Yeah.
But I think it's just going to be every time I get on a bus just now or get on a train, I'm like, am I going to get off this bus with another passenger?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, David, thanks so much for taking time to have a chat to me today, and all the best with what's coming up.
Thank you.